welcome to Bake to the Future, the show where we examine what is happening in the baking industry with a future-focused lens. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Jewell.
We are bringing you a behind-the-scenes interview, a peek behind the ABA curtain, with part of ABA's very own membership team. In the studio, we've got Jennifer Kohlfeldt, ABA's Vice President of Membership and Operations, and Ben Simpson, ABA's Director of Membership. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And it's the first time you guys have been on this show. And so I do look forward to our listeners getting to know you guys a little bit better. We've worked with you guys for a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. So we know you pretty well, but I think it'll be fun to get to know your backgrounds and everything more. But before we get into some of the questions, we always have a hardball question that we start with. Jen, I'll start with you. What is your favorite baked good?
I have a very typical answer, I have to admit, but it's a good chocolate chip cookie. It's got to be the crispy kind. It can't be the soft kind, though. So, yeah. And I'll be interested to see what Ben's answer is, because I think I remember from when I interviewed him.
Before we go to Ben, do you dunk it in milk or do you just take it crunchy?
Oh, no. I need it the crunchier, the better. Yeah. So I like them when they're kind of flat. Like, I think it's because that's what it was like when my mom made them growing up. You know, they were nice and flat and they were just so buttery. Yeah. So that's the kind I like.
All right, Ben, you've had a few seconds to think.
Well, I mean, we're right in lockstep here, Jen, because for me, it is also the tried and true chocolate chip cookie. I'm not just saying that because my boss said that. You can check my staff bio on the website. It's been documented, but same for me. A nice, fresh out of the oven chocolate chip cookie cannot be beat.
Crunchy or soft? Or crunchy or soft?
Nice and soft.
Okay.
Oh, see? Oh, so we are on the opposite.
We are on the opposite sides.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Little yin and yang. All right. Well, thank you for that, guys. That works out really well.
So today we really, besides talking about chocolate chip cookies, we really did want to talk about what you all do at ABA. I think it's fascinating, and I think our listeners will also find it interesting because, we do a lot as a trade association, and a big part of that is fueled by the work that you all do as part of the membership team. So before we get into all of that, maybe you all could share with us your backgrounds and kind of what brought you to ABA. We'll start with Jen.
Sure. So, so my whole career has been in nonprofit management. It's taken a few twists and turns along the way, but I've always worked in the nonprofit space. So, actually, I started working in symphony orchestra management early in my career. So I worked for the Chicago Symphony and then the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And so that's what brought me to Washington. And as I was kind of evaluating what I wanted to do, the whole policy world was opened up to me, being there in Washington. And then I started to learn what trade associations were, what they were about, what they did. And honestly, I kind of fell in love with it. So when I decided to finally make that shift in my career, I immediately went over to the trade association space. I worked for our Business Roundtable first, which was an amazing entrance into the trade association world. They represent Fortune 500 CEOs. So I worked there for a few years, really great learning ground. Then I moved to the private equity trade association that they were just starting up from scratch. That industry had never had a trade association representing it. So we kind of built that from the beginning. I stayed there for 8 or 9 years. Then I took a year off after my second daughter was born to be with my family. And then I came back strong. I went back to a construction trade for about a year, and then I moved over to ABA. And I've been there for 3 years now, which is amazing to believe. But what drew me to it was I just love the people. I love the story. I love the industry. I think it has such a wonderful story to tell. The idea of sort of employing locally and feeding locally. And it's just, as I got to know the people, not only the staff at ABA who are amazing, by the way, but also our member base. They're all just wonderful people who are really passionate about what they do. And I just loved it. So it was a really great home for me to be at. But that's my story.
So I'm a little different. I actually have spent the majority of my career more in the private sector for a long time with down in Richmond, where I'm from, a company that was Royal & Company, then acquired by EAB. But they're a services firm that works with the higher education space, colleges and universities, on a number of different innovative products and services in technology and marketing and best practices. And that was a great experience to be able to work with and serve America's educators. And I really valued that. And that brought me up to the Washington, D.C. area, where their home office was. It's a position I had as a consultant, but really while up here got exposed to the world of trade associations, which is not something I ever had really thought about, but have always really been interested in policy, especially moreover like politics and politicians. And this intersection of business and policy that trade associations kind of occupy is just so cool to me. I made that jump from private sector over to the nonprofit trade association world with the National Association of Manufacturers in 2019 as a associate director of member relations for them. And it was a phenomenal opportunity to be able to work with America's manufacturers of all kinds of different industries, of all kinds of different products on a lot of really big key issues. And in 2020, had the opportunity to come to ABA as the director of membership here. And, what drew me here was really what I think is a very special environment, a very dedicated staff, an opportunity to serve a specific industry that just does a lot for us as a country, literally puts food on our tables, and is so passionate, so relationship driven, and a staff that is just so cohesive and unified in their mission to support them. It was just a phenomenal opportunity, and I'm really pleased to be a part of it.
Yeah, Ben joined us during COVID, and it took several months. It took several months for a lot of us to meet him in person. So it was interesting the first time we saw him. We're like, "Oh, you're a real person, and you're like, more than 6 foot tall." It was surprising. Both of you guys talked about like finding our way into trade associations, and I think in membership, you probably spend a lot of time explaining what trade associations are. And so, even though people are listening to this podcast, they know it's about the baking industry, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone listening really understands what a trade association does or why it might be necessary to an industry. But because there is literally a trade association for everything. So, and some of them are really like off the wall, like you wouldn't even think about it. But at least ours, like you can be like, look, this is what I'm.
Yes.
And so, Jen, like when you're talking to folks, whether it's current members, I think that there's a lot of current members, like employees of our membership, they don't really know what ABA actually is or what a trade association actually is. So how do you explain that?
That's a good question. So, honestly, depending on who you're talking to, you might sort of nuance your answer a little bit. But overall, a trade association is really an organization that gives a voice, a unified voice to an industry, right? That's the main point of it. And it's a place where, companies or, can come together and speak with that one unified voice to try and get things done, whether it's legislative, whether it's regulatory, whether it's on, sort of more of a state level or a local level. Trade associations typically work in all of those areas. And we're also fortunate in the fact that ABA does a lot more than just, our advocacy work, which is really important, obviously, to what we do. But, we also have educational programming. We work a lot on workforce development and trying to draw people into this amazing industry that we represent. It's really about telling that fulsome story of this industry. And so that's what a trade association does.
What are some of the things, Ben, that are kind of swirling in the membership right now?
Well, that's a huge part of it's an interesting question because we work really hard to figure out what that looks like for every member. Jen touched on it. There's a lot that we do, whether it be on the policy, the regulatory front, on workforce education, on business connections, the mix of engagement on those things and the things that are priorities for our members, whether they be bakers or suppliers, is going to be kind of unique from member to member. And, that's, I think, a big point of pride for the membership team at ABA, as well as us as an association, is that we really get to know our members individually, uniquely, to understand like what their specific priority set is. Right now there is a lot of headwinds and stressful things happening in supply chain volatility, workforce, rising ingredient costs throughout the industry. And, that we are involved on so many fronts to try to be in our members' corners on that. It's tough because, they're in this stuff day in and day out, head down, focus on it. And it's our job to be their advocate, right? To be in their corner and to, really understand how these things are affecting them so that we can get the best solutions in place. And, it's honestly very important work, and it's very rewarding work to do.
And so, Jen, it sounds like then the way we approach membership is really from, we have all these programs, but really you guys work to create a bespoke experience and make sure that the members, we listen to the needs and then we present them with what we think could help.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Again, that kind of mix is going to look different for everybody, but especially coming in from the get-go, right? When a company joins ABA, Jen and I put a lot of emphasis on that first year, really getting to know them and their priorities and having a very guided onboarding process to really make sure we can get the level of engagement right. That's a huge thing, is that trade association memberships like ABA are for the whole company. And the degree to which that is going to be broad or not broad is different for everybody. And the things that different folks want to get engaged on is going to be different for everybody. And it takes time, right? To get engaged with those folks, to educate them on what we have in place that could be a resource for them. And we have to be very mindful that, their day job is not to be an ABA member. We have to really, work with them and be understanding of all the different things they've got going on at their companies to be able to ensure that we can kind of plug in as a resource in a way that works for them.
And it's also about building that trust with them, right? They might come to us with issues that they might not really speak to many other people about and sort of say, hey, I've got this problem or this thing has come up and I have no clue what to do about this right now. Do you have any idea where I have a resource for this? And so, making sure that, especially from early on, we build that trust and that open line of communication with them is really important so that they feel comfortable coming to us about things like that. So, because that's really critical in terms of really receiving the value of this large community that ABA is.
And I love that you say community, because I feel like that is definitely how we view it and how our members see it as being part of a community. Could you maybe walk us through like what that community looks like? Like who are the members? Who are you interacting with? And maybe like the current state of our membership today, because I know it has changed throughout the years.
Yeah, no, it's our membership is diverse. I think it really represents the entirety of the wholesale baking industry. And honestly, we're growing it on a daily basis, which is really wonderful news. That certainly makes ABA far more impactful, as our membership grows and becomes more diverse and we have a stronger unified voice. So, the ABA membership is all the way from, the very large corporations that you can probably see their brands all over the not just the country, but, sort of globally as well. All the way down to small family bakers who are figuring out how to do this wholesale business. Maybe they've transitioned from a retail shop and they want to sort of build out their business in a different way. And we're helping them figure that out. Over the past couple of years, we added actually a membership tier for those entrepreneurial bakers who are trying to build out their businesses and really get their feet on the ground. And it's everything in between. But reality is that if you stop and you look at the baker side of our member base, probably 80% of those are small and medium bakers. They're not these really, sort of large corporations. Although, it's wonderful to have those in the membership too, because everybody learns from everybody else. So it's really it's a really wonderful community for the bakers to be a part of. And then I don't know, Ben, do you want to talk about the allied side of the membership as well?
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't do what we do without the support from our allied members. It's an incredible group of suppliers of everything from ingredients, flour and millers, equipment companies, packaging companies, professional services providers, software companies, really all those folks who make the product possible. They're just great supporters of ABA's mission to build out a strong future for a robust, well-supported industry. They're phenomenal resources, thought leaders for us for better understanding the environment and things like ingredients or connecting members with a new, who might be looking for new equipment. We need those kind of resources in place to be able to best serve our baker membership, and having kind of both sides of the coin with our allied suppliers as well as our bakers working in unison makes for a strong trade association. We couldn't do it without them.
Absolutely. So, but we've been growing the membership, as to be expected during the pandemic. It dipped a little bit, which I think every trade association experienced a dip during the pandemic. But we've been able to bring the membership back strong, and we've surpassed that. And actually, the ABA membership is at the largest number it's ever been in ABA's history. So it's a really wonderful story to tell.
Yay! Good job, guys. And I know that's something you guys have worked really hard on, and so. I think that it just shows the amount of energy that our industry has, and the amount of passion bakers and our allied members have for being together. And, and that's kind of when I first started. Jen and I started around the same time, right around like 3.5 years ago. And, I'm immediately thrown into this role where there's just this alphabet soup of not only trade associations, so you get to know the trade associations, you get to know the alphabet soup of all the government agencies, but then there's also this alphabet soup of just baking industry associations, whether it's associations or societies or whatever. And, I think that, working in marketing, I'm always trying to figure out, how do we communicate how we're different? How do you guys communicate that?
Well, it can be tough sometimes to cut through the noise. There's in 2022, there's just so many things that, an executive or decision maker at also a bakery can be focused on. There's a lot out there, but, our value proposition is very strong. I always go into any conversation with a potential prospect or a new member, just knowing what our team does here behind the scenes, always feeling very confident that there is no stronger advocate for a baker or supplier than ABA. There's no one else you'd rather have in your corner. We prove that day in and day out from the impact that we make behind the scenes on policy and on regulatory issues that affect the industry, from the way we bring the industry together at our events, such as our annual convention, our upcoming trade association, IBIE, this fall, and the way that we respond to what our members need and tell us, our priorities from them, whether it be cutting edge workforce training resources or insights into how consumer trends are shifting or what innovations are happening out there. We are always keeping an ear to what our members are telling us, because we know those are the things that they're going to want to take advantage of. And so that's what propels us forward.
Yeah, and to further on that, I think it's also just no one else. I mean, not to go back to community, but to me, that's really critical, and that's a lot of what ABA has to offer. No one else has the community that we have, right? I mean, if you stop and you look at our baker and our allied members, also as well our international baker members, I mean, our reach is really far in terms of the industry. And then obviously, all of our connections here in Washington, D.C. on the advocacy side are very important. But the community that we've built sort of in the Washington, D.C. area in terms of our policy and advocacy work, and then the broader industry community that we've built, I don't think anyone else can really compare to that. So,
And Ben, you mentioned IBIE, the International Baking Industry Exposition. And, Katie and I have talked about it on the podcast before. We're really looking forward to it. What are some things that you all are looking forward to at IBIE?
Let's start with you, Jen.
Oh, I'm just so excited, right? I love IBIE. I can't help it. So 2019 was my first show. And as Katie and Haley and Ben know, I work a lot on IBIE behind the scenes. So that's sort of like my second job, if you will. But I'm really excited about this year. I think the show floor is going to be just packed full of people. The exhibitors are really excited. They've not been able to get out there and show what they have to offer for years now. And so there's a lot of pent up energy and excitement in terms of them wanting to get out there. A lot of them are doing bigger booths this year because they just want to really make an impact and show what they've got. And then in terms of the attendee side, I feel like the folks who are going to be walking the floor really have ideas about what they're looking for, what it is they want to see. They're coming to the show with, again, the sort of pent up energy from the past few years over the pandemic. And I think it's going to really result in a wonderful, energetic show. In terms of the planning of the show, I mean, we've got a lot of things going on. We've got different pavilions planned for this year. In terms of the ABA BIMA booth, we're going to have, a lot of features that we have there in terms of sort of thought leadership that we're getting out and getting, to our audience. So Ben and I are super pumped. I mean, we've been looking at the show floor, kind of starting to plan out like where we're going to walk, who we're going to talk to, how the two of us are going to make it all the way around the LBCC in a handful of days and get to talk to everybody we want to talk to.
Yeah, and if you look at it, it's 135 member booths. So I was doing the math on it, and you have to definitely wear your walking shoes, going around to see even just the ABA members.
Yeah, so we're really excited about that. Plus also just introducing ABA in a different way to non-members, right? That's a really huge part of what IBIE does. And so we're also really focusing on that as well. I don't know, Ben, if you've got additional thoughts in terms of like our presence at IBIE.
No, it's exactly right. It'll be my first IBIE, my first expo. So just being able to be there for the first time is really exciting to me. To be able to meet so many of our members for the first time that are going to be there in person is going to be a thrill. And it'll be fun to try to strike that right balance of just consuming carbs all day long, eating samples, and then trying to burn that by walking. That's going to be a fun tightrope to walk. Yeah. But seriously, though, I mean, the innovation that I think is going to be on display is going to be so exciting to see. Baking is a very innovation-driven industry. That's something I've been so impressed with since joining ABA, how much I've learned about that. And, as head down as everyone in the industry is, and everyone across America has had to be through all these headwinds and all these challenges in the past few years, I think being able to come together and see what that innovation looks like, what the road forward looks like is going to be really exciting. I'm excited to see it.
I always like to mention and make sure we talk about how members should know how ABA is involved with IBIE, because I think that a lot of people don't realize that ABA is the majority owner of IBIE. And so through their membership and with their membership with us, it is a big supporter of IBIE. And we also have, very strong insights as to what is happening with that show. I just always like to mention that. And Jen, I think that with IBIE, the proceeds from the show go back to associations.
Yeah. So that's a good question, Katie. What happens is IBIE is backed by or co-owned by ABA and BIMA, and who are both nonprofit trade associations. So while it itself is not a nonprofit, it is owned by nonprofits. And so what happens is, at the end of the show, once all of the expenses are spent and everyone's paid and all of that good stuff is done, we stop and we look at what the net was. What were we actually able to bring in, and we take that and we distribute it well, first we keep some seed money for the next show cycle, because obviously we need a little bit of money to be able to get the next show in the next 3 years off the ground. So we keep a little bit of seed money for the next show. And then, yes, we distribute it out to ABA and BEMA, on their sort of ownership percentages. And then what the two associations do is they take those funds, and you're right, they reinvest them back into the industry. They use those funds over the next few years to support their programming, in support of the industry, their advocacy work, all of that kind of thing. So every single dollar that goes into IBIE, if it's not, sort of to cover the cost of putting on the show, it goes right back out to the industry. So really, you could say every dollar is spent towards the industry itself, which is really a wonderful story to tell. It's quite different than a lot of the sort of for-profit shows you see out there. It's a very different business model. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's really important.
And maybe before we wrap up, do you all have any thoughts on the future of the ABA membership and where you see it going from here? Maybe Ben, do you want to start?
I think the future is very bright. I mean, we are, as Jen said, we're growing. There's a huge opportunity for us. So many companies out there that may not have been engaged with us in the past, or may not know who we are. We are a big tent. There is room for everyone at the table, and we need those voices because it empowers us to be a better, more robust, more impactful trade association. The bigger and stronger we are in terms of our membership, and the more diverse we are in terms of our membership. The way in which we are being responsive to the industry, and which we are always putting our heads together behind the scenes to come up with new ways to, drive that value home with the members, is really exciting. And I think it's a great time to be an ABA member.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think there's definitely still room to grow in terms of the membership. Ben and I have really made a point of taking a look at the industry as a whole. Obviously, we've identified, some of the gaps where we might not have a few of those big names, that aren't currently members, and we'll keep on them. But the reality is that I think there were holes that we just didn't realize were even in the marketplace and in the wholesale baking industry. And they tend to be more regionally focused, maybe sort of a little bit more under the radar. And so we've really been spending a lot of time trying to get, our message out to those folks and to introduce them to what ABA is and how it can benefit them. And, honestly, often that message is really well received. They often had no idea, which is amazing to think considering ABA is 125 years old. But reality is that, if you don't know what a trade association is, you don't know what a trade association is. And you don't even think to look for it, right? So it's really making sure that everybody, from within the industry knows about us and knows what we have to offer and knows what the community has to offer here at ABA as well. But I'm really excited to see where we continue to grow. And honestly, Ben and I are also working a lot on continuing to develop out member benefits and all of that kind of thing. So we're really excited about the next few years.
Well, I love that note to end on. I think with that, we'll wrap up, and just wanted to thank you, Jen and Ben, for joining us today. This was great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. We really enjoyed it.
And I will want to let our listeners know that please email us to let us know what you thought of the show by emailing hello@americanbakers.org or leave us a voicemail at baketothefuture.org. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts: Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or Ghana.